Hi everyone, I'm Ruchika Bindra and welcome to this week's episode of #NoFilter. We are talking about an important issue that not just affects everybody in the York region, but all across the world. We are talking about trafficking and human trafficking, to be specific. We'll see you on the other side of the show. Hi everyone, I'm Ruchika Bindra and you are watching #NoFilter. With me today is our guest panelist, Debbie Pond. She is a retired RCMP officer. She is also an anti-human trafficking advocate, and she's also a member of the board of chair of directors of You Are Home. We're really excited to have you on. Thank you so much for coming.
You're welcome.
We're looking forward to talking about, I know, a topic that's a little bit serious, but I think it's quite important to inform a lot of members in our community, especially our teens. I also want to introduce our fabulous guest panelists, our teens that come on every episode and try to engage with us on different topics. We have Rachel, we have Olivia, and we have Nikta. So, Debbie, I'm going to start with sort of the basics that a lot of, when I was prepping for the show, I was talking to a lot of teens in the area, a lot of teens in the region, and they said, can you explain me what it means when we say the word trafficking, specifically human trafficking?
Human trafficking is when an individual would recruit another person. They would exercise control over them, and the purpose of doing that is for exploitation.
Okay, so there's always a means to do something after to it.
That's right. And generally, the person will have a fear for their safety for themselves or the safety for someone else. So they feel like they just can't walk out of that situation. They can't leave. They feel they have to do what they're being forced to do.
Okay.
So there's control.
And when we talk about control, another question that parallelly comes to my mind is when we talk about the idea of trafficking and human trafficking, it's something that a lot of people think happens in sort of areas that aren't as developed, or, it happens in sort of little corners or villages. And a lot of the teens I was talking to, and they're like, really? This is an issue in Canada? This is an issue that could be happening in York region, in Toronto? And I said, yeah, it's an issue that can happen everywhere. There's no demographic or there's no geographical location that limits it. So how do you do we have any stats or any information right now that says where these things are more prevalent?
Well, we know from the International Labor Organization that now more than any other time in history, we have approximately 27 million people, that's men, women, girls, boys, who are being enslaved around the world.
Oh my God.
So we know that for sure. It's a complex issue. It's a clandestine issue. So here in Canada, we don't have a lot of stats on how many people are being trafficked, how many individuals are being trafficked daily on a daily basis. But we certainly do know that individuals are being trafficked. They come into Canada being trafficked. They're trafficked out of Canada, mainly to the U.S., but they're also trafficked within our borders, so cross-province or within a community. So you don't have to move in order to be trafficked. You can be trafficked in your own community as well.
Girls, I know this is an issue as well. Before the show started, a lot of you had so many different questions. So does anyone want to kind of jump in? Because I have so many that I can go on forever.
I had a question. How does someone know if they're being trafficked? Like, what are some of the signals?
Well, some of the factors that you would look at if someone is enticing you with, say you're getting a new relationship, and they're enticing you with new gifts that you wouldn't normally be able to buy. They promise you that you're going to make a lot of money, and they generally start with a romantic relationship. Because they'll say, they love you, they build trust with you, they listen to your problems, they find out where you're vulnerable. If you've had a fight with friends, or if you're maybe vulnerable at home because there's some problems at home, so you feel like your parents maybe aren't listening to you like they used to. So they pick up on these vulnerabilities, and that's where they will build that relationship with you. So there's a process that traffickers go through to lure young people and young women, and also young boys and men too are involved, not in the numbers that we see with young women and teens.
So does it have to be someone older luring someone younger, or does it happen the same age as well?
Sometimes it can happen the same age. Generally speaking, it's young men who are traffickers. It can be older men as well. But we have seen some younger girls who are now recruiting for young girls. So a lot of times we see it in group homes, but they will also recruit within the field where they are, within their social circle and network. So we do see young girls who are also recruiting, but predominantly it's young boys and young men who are recruiting.
So Debbie, I want to understand, basically it could start off with something as simple as, you know, you're going about your life, you meet an individual, he seems to show an interest in you. Let's say I'm, you know, a young girl, he shows an interest in you. They originally start by building trust, right? So they want to make sure you're comfortable with them, they know a lot about you, you guys have that relationship, and obviously they try their best to make it romantic, so, you know, you almost feel a sense of obligation to them because you have that connection.
Most of the young girls do feel that they fall in love and that person is their boyfriend.
Right. And how do they kind of then get to tell you, like, okay, you know, this is what we kind of want you to do? Like, how do they bridge, I guess, that loop to make you do it?
So one thing they do in the process is they start to isolate you from your friends and family.
Okay.
So you're not having the same sort of contact with your friends and family. That they're the ones that they're the person that you're going to go to all the time.
For everything and for all your needs. Okay.
Yes, for all your needs. And then they'll talk maybe about that they need money for some reason. They've showered you with all these gifts, they've taken you to nice restaurants, they've done things that are expensive. So now they say, hey, we need money. In order to do that, I want you to do this one thing for me, just this one time. And sometimes, if the girl is reluctant, the young girl, they may start to use some force with her. They call it discipline.
Okay.
Or they may have some alcohol and drugs involved.
Just to get her relaxed or get her a
right.
little bit more in agreement to
That's
it.
right. But she feels that she's doing it for them as a couple. And she doesn't recognize that she's being forced and manipulated to do this.
Because you're kind of presenting it as a whole. It's about you and me together.
That's right.
Together,
we're building a life together.
We're building a life together.
We're going to have that home, you know, the white picket fence, that dream. And lots of times when you look at, you know, videos where traffickers have talked about it, they talk about selling the dream. But it's really an illusion.
Obviously, because they're never interested in doing that. And when girls start getting into this situation, how is it that they, like, kind of tell their parents, okay, this is my boyfriend and I'm always, you know, with him, or mom and dad, I'm no longer with you? Like, how does that step happen where they begin to distance themselves from those around them?
For a lot of the young girls, the majority of them, they're probably not living at home. So they're in vulnerable situations, whether they're living on the street, they're homeless, or there's poverty, or sometimes they're living with one parent.
Right.
You know, so they have vulnerable situations, but it can happen to anyone who comes from any walk of life, any ethnicity, any background. So it doesn't just happen to some of the girls that are more marginalized and vulnerable.
Okay.
But what happens is they keep it a secret.
Okay.
It's not, they don't talk about it with their family. So there are a couple of young girls, survivors, who have talked about it, and their parents didn't know. And when they did, their parents tried to convince them to leave.
All right, Debbie, so we'll hold that thought. We're going to be back on the other side on the break where we'll talk about this and so much more, what the process is really like. Hi everyone, welcome back to #NoFilter. I'm Ruchika Bindra, and we are talking with Debbie Pond about human trafficking and what it actually means. So Debbie, on the other side of the break, we were talking kind of about how, you know, they lure you in, they build a sense of confidence. And I was thinking, what does it mean to be, like, what types of trafficking can it be? Is it only sort of prostitution? Is it only sort of a type of sexual favor that's done? Or is there other sorts of ways that they convince you to do something?
The predominant type of trafficking that we see in Canada is sex trafficking.
Okay.
So child exploitation and exploitation. We also see forced labor, forced servitude, other types of criminal activities. We don't, not to my knowledge, have seen a forced organ donation.
Okay.
And forced marriage is not in the criminal code, but certainly there are offenses around forced marriage that are in the criminal code. So those are some of the particular types of trafficking that we see across the country.
And basically when they, I guess you could say, traffic you to an individual, do they traffic you sort of to somebody who's, like, are they from a good family? Are they from, well, like, how are when they're trafficking you for money, like, where are they sending you, kind of?
They're moving you to different locations, usually. Like I say, you can be trafficked in your own city or town, but lots of times, like for instance, there could be a young girl who maybe is trafficked or lured in Nova Scotia, and she could be brought here to York Region. So they could be in motels, hotels, they could be in strip clubs, massage parlors, anything like
They
that.
could be providing services to wealthy people, to common people, to
any
anyone
person.
who wants, I guess, that sort of service done for them.
That's right.
So, girls, I have a question for you. Is this a topic that throughout your education, because I think it's important that teens know about this, you know, the sooner the better, and the younger you are, you kind of start to be aware of these important aspects going on in society. Do you guys kind of get that information? Do you guys get sources of this information shared with you?
I would say no. Like, honestly, the first time I've heard about this happening, like, in where we live in our region is today. Like, and I had to ask before the show, could you give me a definition so that way I kind of have a better idea of what it is? So, like, honestly, no, it's not something that they teach in schools in, like, any of those classes that we take or anything. So I think this is a good way to bring it up and have it talked about.
It's definitely not something that we really talk about or even heard, because like Rachel said, I never heard about this until today. But like we do as girls and guys, get told about, like, just be careful who you're talking to, be careful about the people you associate yourself with.
Yeah.
But other than that, it's really not like nothing.
And I think we also associate it with something that happens, you know, outside of Canada. You know,
yeah,
it doesn't
which
happen
is a
in
huge
Canada.
thing our viewers said.
You know?
That
Yeah.
they didn't think, which I think it's important to know that, and as well throughout the show, we're going to have a list of contacts of, you know, the You Are Home. We're going to have a few, I think the RCMP number as well. We gave the kids helpline as well, right? And a few numbers that if ever somebody thinks that they know someone who's getting trafficked, if you have a lead, if, you know, you have more questions, if you have been a victim and you want help, I think it's great to know that in Canada these things can happen, as it can happen across the world anywhere. And we, as long as, you know, as a community, we have those sources to help, I think that's what's really important. Debbie, I want to turn the conversation a little bit to about victims. So how does somebody get out of it? And then how do we, you know, kind of rebuild them from there on? Because they've been through clearly a huge state of trauma. So where does that process start? How do you kind of get away from it?
The process starts usually lots of times when there's been a lot of violence, maybe.
Okay.
Or there's been an intervention by police, or another survivor has gotten out and they have contact still with some of the girls who are still being trafficked. So they tell them about the services that are out there for them. And then they have to reach out, or again, because there could be an intervention, the police are aware of community services that would help them. So they will give them all the information that they need. They'll set them up with a worker, a case manager, and then they will go on and get the services that they need. Things like getting their ID back, a simple thing like that, because most of the traffickers will take their ID from them. So they don't even have their ID. The cell phone that they have is a cell phone that the trafficker has given them. So he's always checking her cell phone to see, who have you been calling, what have you been doing, you know. And they put rules around when they can eat, what they dress, all those things. That's the control piece.
And they
that
still
the
make you
trafficker-
think in doing that it's because I'm in love with you,
Yes.
that I'm telling you now you should eat and now you shouldn't eat, or now you should be with me and now you can't go out. Like, can they go out with their friends for a dinner kind of thing, or most of the time they're secluded?
They're secluded most of the
Okay.
time. They're isolated. They control what hours they work, how much money they make. If they don't make the amount of money that they are supposed to that evening, then it's tagged on to the next evening.
Oh my God.
So, you know, so it's a pretty isolated situation. So when they reach out for help, you know, they either reach out to a community agency or the police. Those services are in place for them to be able to get the help that they need.
Wonderful. Nitka, I know you wanted to ask a
Other
question.
than reaching out to like a police or like a community service, how can someone get out of a situation? Or is it just that way?
No, if they feel that they can leave safely, they will do that. Some of the girls have walked into a police station because they know that they're in. The language trafficking is a language that we use. They don't see themselves as being trafficked. They see themselves the fact that they don't keep the money that they earn, that they don't have their ID. They're not free to call their family. So when they reach that point where they have maybe a cry out, we call, then they will try and get help. They will reach out into the community. Maybe they still have some contact with their friends, a little bit of contact maybe with their family, just texting, but again, their family may not know where they are. And we know that a lot of them are posted on backpages.com is one area, so that's where they go to look.
Is that like difficult though? Because like with the control aspect, doesn't that leave like a huge psychological effect where they feel like that they can't leave and they feel like they don't want to at some point?
That's very true. There's a trauma bond that happens between the trafficker and the young girl. And so when they break that, that's what has to happen. They have to break that bond. So some of them, even though they're offered services, we know that they will exit, but they may come back in, they may re-enter because they say this is their safe place. So sometimes it takes 4 or 5 times before a person will leave permanently. So we know that often happens, and so we're prepared to support them wherever they are in their trafficking situation.
When they reach those stages of going and coming back, I guess they're kind of in the midst of detachment. Do we kind of try to get a lead by the police? Like, do we try to find out, okay, where is this happening? Where is this person going back and forth? Who is their trafficker? Like, do we kind of try to get these sort of sources done indirectly, or do we ask them directly if you're a victim?
The police have a human trafficking team here in York Region. They've been very proactive in the work that they do, so they're very experienced in working with young women who have been trafficked and talking to them about the situation. So they will ask questions around that particular incident, so they can investigate. But they're also proactive in looking online, because it's online where a lot of the traffickers and the pimps will engage that conversation. Because a lot of young people today, as we know, they're all involved
Online.
in social media.
Right.
So it's not that it doesn't happen outside social media, but we see a huge increase in
It's
social
pushed,
media.
obviously, through that.
Through social media.
So on the other side of the break, we're going to talk about how social media has changed the way, or I guess amplified this problem. We're also going to talk to Debbie about the You Are Home. So we'll see you on the other side of the break. Hi everyone, welcome back to #NoFilter. We are talking with Debbie about human trafficking, what it means and how it can impact you in areas obviously in Canada, especially in the York region. So Debbie, social media, we were talking about that right before. Obviously with today's generation, it makes only logical sense that a lot of the traffickers are going to kind of lure you in through that online. So is it almost like online dating? Like, how would I know?
It would be difficult to know unless you know the person who you're talking with.
Okay.
That's why so many parents and teachers talk to students and teens about who are your group of friends that you're talking to online. Do you really know that person? Because they can pretend to be a 17-year-old boy when they're really a 32-year-old young man who's trying to lure you into trafficking.
And what kinds of sites do they use? Like, for example, like normal kids use things like Instagram, Snapchat, Hot or Not, like, you know, normal dating sites.
All of those sites.
Really?
Yes.
Such common, like such mainstream sites are being used for something like this.
Absolutely.
And I guess because, as you said, they disguise it at first so you don't know.
Yeah, the goal for the trafficker is to meet you at some point. They've built that trust again. They're building that relationship. And then they'll meet you, and then they'll develop that relationship more and more.
And do they engage with sort of a sexual relationship with you as well? Or
Yes.
they make it, okay, so they do as well?
Yes, they
do.
do.
So you really believe that that's my boyfriend, or that's my other
Absolutely.
half, and that's my partner?
Yes.
Oh my God. Okay, this is like, it's kind of mind-boggling to me that this is happening in such a huge way. And I think the problem with it is that not that we're a society that's more naive, but I think we're a society that we're so always engrossed in, you know, wanting love and getting love. And it's a natural, you know, desire that I think we sometimes don't realize, okay, am I being abused? Am I going into a situation that seems off? Or is this just sort of his kind of forceful love, you know? I think, and that's where I also say, I think a lot of the issue is a little bit with the media portrayal of trafficking, because as I was reading into it for today's episode, I realized there were two aspects, right? This idea of love off late has been glamorized in the media as, you know, rough love is good as well, and strong love is good as well, and, you know, having a man that exerts control sometimes is nice. And I think that's where sometimes teenagers and women think it's okay, and they don't necessarily know the line between what, you know, control means and passing something which could become something like abuse ultimately. And another issue is that when we look at, you know, videos, or we hear about cases such as that, we don't really, the media hasn't really shown a realistic view of trafficking. You know, it's almost dramatized, like, oh, you're probably standing on the street like a prostitute in some, you know, really poor area, and someone's picking you up. So you don't, I guess, show the facts that it could happen anywhere. As you said, it could happen somewhere, you know, from a main city like Toronto to an area in, you know, Nova Scotia to Kitchener, Waterloo. So I wanted to ask you, I know the You Are Home Foundation is something that you're, actively involved with. You're part of the chair of the board of directors. Can you tell me a little bit about what the goal is, and if somebody wants to get involved, what can they do?
So 2 or 3 years ago, our church that I'm involved with, Valley View Alliance, here in Newmarket, we looked at what was happening around trafficking here in York Region, and we did some research. And the number one need was that there were no safe houses. So when someone exits, they need a safe place to go. And there was nothing like that. So we have set up the not-for-profit, and we are going for our CRA, our charitable status with the federal government, to establish safe houses here in York Region for trafficked victims and for survivors and children. Children are often a barrier for women leaving, because lots of times they can't bring their children with them, so it's a barrier for them to leave the situation. And then we will also have support services, seamless services for them to whatever they need. They need trauma counseling, which is huge. They need to go back to school, get an education, life skills, basic things that they've maybe missed out on in their years when they were in that situation. And then we also do public awareness and education. So we go out and talk to schools, we talk to students, we talk to organizations, businesses, faith groups, become aware of trafficking here in York Region and across Canada.
Wonderful. So the link is of the Facebook page is on our website as well, and it is going to be posted there for you to click on if you want to get more information. Please, if you have any leads as well, use the resources we have available for you. Debbie, I have a question that comes to my mind when we talk about the victim. When they leave and they come back, do they kind of have that fear that or is it true that do we have cases that the trafficker will try to stalk them after or follow them, or on the contrary, does the trafficker say, okay, she's gone to get help, so she might be involved with the police. I, in fact, want to have nothing to do with her reaching me. How does it work?
Sometimes the trafficker will go after them again, will lure them, they try to lure them back in. But lots of times they look on it, that's okay, if you're gone, then I'll just go get another one. Because they'll lure, they have a process. And they're very good at manipulating.
Yeah, if they can get you to come to that point, clearly they know how to exert control, right? By building, I think trust is the #1 aspect. Sorry, I think you wanted to say something, Olivia?
Yeah, I was just curious, how young can these girls or boys be?
In Canada, we know that girls as young as 12 and 13. So up to about ages 22, but we know that there are other girls older than that, women, young women, who are involved as well. But they call what it's aging out when they're sort of 24. And if they have addictions and those health issues, those are also precursors to some control that the trafficker doesn't want to be involved with.
Go ahead, Nick.
And for the 12-year-old girls who are getting lured into these situations, how old are the men usually, or the boys?
Well, the trafficker can be at any age. Usually it's a young person. It can even be someone in their family. So we know that sometimes it's a member of the family who's involved in this type of activity. And again, on the demand side, the reason this happens is because men are seeking younger and younger girls to have sex with. It's child abuse. So we know that. It's not a child prostitute. That does not exist. It's child sexual abuse when it's a young person.
Interesting.
And I think it's like a great issue that, older people target younger, a younger audience because, they're in the state where they're growing and they want attention. They're trying to find who they are. And these people are taking advantage of that idea. Especially
if you're from a vulnerable situation, as you said, right? A lot of them don't necessarily come from full families, or, they have sort of their own issues going on. So any source of, A, attention I'm getting, B, trust, C, I'm seeing somebody that's giving me all this love and care, and at first is showering with me with, the world of attention. As a girl, you're going to begin to think, okay, he genuinely likes me, right? So on today's episode, we spoke about an issue that I think is extremely important, not just in Canada, but especially in the York region itself. I think as a community, we should kind of make the effort within our own community at first to make the change. So please, if you have anything to say about this, tweet us on #NoFilter, and all the links will be on our page. Thank you for watching.